Hello friends, tonight we go into the fancy, silly, and sometimes not clean bedrooms off old-time kings, where might, desire, and not knowing any limits all crashed together in a big, amazing way. So, before you settle in, please take some time to like this video and join us, but only if you really have fun with what I do here. And please tell me in the messages where you are watching from and what the clock says for you. It is always so interesting to learn who is with us from all over the globe. Now, make the lights low, maybe put on a fan for a quiet buzzing sound, and let us begin this evening's story together. King John from England, also called John with no land, and jokingly the worst dinner friend in England's past, is most known for writing the big paper, losing half of France, and somehow still finding moments to be very naughty with many of the rich men's girls. John's rule from 1199 to 1216 was a perfect lesson in how to not act in a big job in ruling a mess. In his own life, somehow even more of a mess. John did not just have lovers, he took them. He was known for stealing women from good families, locking them in kingly homes, and keeping them until they were either wed to someone else or remembered. His best way of splitting up strong families was not fighting, it washerming the wife, making the husband feel alone, and then making him pay 2 times money. Smart people who wrote things down were so not okay with John's actions that even biased old-time writers, people who usually did not see witch hunts and whippings, wrote things like, he was not calm with ladies, and he did not stay away from wives and girls. That's old-time talk for, he made the holiday party very, very strange. At one time, John was said to have 30 sweethearts on his official list. That is not loving. That is a people problem. A few rich men told the king directly that John was misusing their kindness, which is a nice way of saying he was with everyone, even the helper sand, maybe the family goat. His actions were so awful, it almost made people fight back, not because of money or fighting, but because half the lords were scared to leave their wives alone during kingly visits. One lord said he would not see John unless his whole house was locked away first. That is talking it out, 13th century style, and still, in a true kingly way, John never thought there was an issue. He thought no one could say no to him. There is no proof of this, except in his own notes. But when you are the king, thinking you are great is normal. In the end, King John left a country in a big mess, a history of not being trusted, and maybe a few kids no one mentioned at the castle. Who was the type of king who made people create voting just to keep him far from their loved ones? Not the baddest king in history, but for sure the one you'd never ask to watch the kids. Charles VI of France, also known as Charles the Silly, was king from 1380 to 1422, and yes, that name was earned, not given as a joke at a fun dinner party. He started his rule with good signs, young, good-looking, able to do things. Then stuff went he began to forget who he was, hurting his own brave men. And at one point he thought he was created from glass, telling his helpers to cover him in cloths so he would not break while he walked. Not quite the picture of a king's power, but very good in its sounds strange, fearful way. Now, most kings who think they are delicate glass toys usually stay out of trouble. Not Charles. he somehow found a way to have a kingly sweetheart, a silly thought, and a country fight, all at one time. A man of many tasks. His very patient wife, Isabeau of Bavaria, attempted to run the home, while Charles did stuff like a rune away screaming from looking glasses, and said no to baths, for fear the water might make him disappear. At the same time, his sweetheart, Odette, the champ divers, was quietly brought into the big house, shown to everyone as his comfort, which was old-time code for "do not ask things, just be happy." Odetta, for her part, was with Charles during his most crazy years. She must have had the waiting power of an angel, or the owning rights of a queen. She was said to brush his hair, hear his glass-filled talks, and help him get into mental layers of soft clothes, so he could sit down without getting hurt. Nothing shows love like helping your kingly loved one into a pillow costume. But Charles was not just odd when no one was looking. He also had court fun where things went very, very wrong. During one well-known party called the Ball of the Burning Men, he and his pals dressed up as wild people in clothes that catch fire and danced near open flames. Of course, someone let go of a flame and a few of them burned up. Charles lived, but his good did not. With everything, Charles was the father of 12 kids. A few during times of Simento be clear-minded, or at least clear-minded enough, kingly. Books do not say if Hera called their names, but we can guess that calling a baby not made of glass was not a good idea. Charles VI led France to its downfall, but more amazingly, he mental sickness, kingly trouble, and old-time fire-making, all a part of the same sad, funny story, and they still let him have a crown. Peter the Mean, also known as Pedro the Fair, based on If You Were on His Side, or Under a Floor because of him, was King of Castile from 1350 to 1369. His thought of love was a strange mix of kingly good looks, being too watchful, and the sometimes needed but badly timed killing. His first love story was not exactly like a play. He liked a rich lady named Maria de Padilla, who he might or might not have wed in secret. The secret part is important, mostly because he was also being wed to other ladies for friendship, which made stuff a little strange. One of those ladies was Blanche of Bourbon, a French lady he wed, then put in a castle 3 days later. She used the rest of her life lock it up because Peter thought Maria had nicer hair, or maybe he just did not like Blanche's way of talking. In any case, it was a very strong way of ignoring someone. Maria, at the same time, became his love for life. Even when he wed other ladies, she was always his top choice. When she passed away, Peter was said to have cried for days, and then sad that she be named his real wife after the fact, just to make everyone mixed up, and Mabeto explained the fact that she had already had 4 of his babies. But Peter's strong feelings did not end at surprise marriage endings and kingly stealing. He was known for liking people in a rough way, which is not pretty. It is just not safe. One of his sweethearts, Donna Juana, tried to go away from him. She was later discovered in parts, as were a few office political foes and family, and sometimes people who looked at him in the wrong way. Old writings say that Peter sometimes saw killings from his high window while resting with a sweetheart. That is not a nice, bad person. That is a TV bad guy with no self-control. But even with all the fuss, the Castilian court was not once dull. Talk moved quicker, thundering, and Peter's loves blurred the line between strong feeling and payback. His idea of loving acts included sudden weddings, sudden marriage endings, and the sometimes sudden poking. In the end, Peter was killed by his own half-brother in a quite meaningful acto family healing. But his name, as one of Europe's most meanly unloving lovers, is still known. If love is a big fight, Peter brought big war tools. Edward II of England was king from 1307 to 1327, and is most known for two things: losing to the Scots at Bannockburn, and giving more love to his boyfriends than to his real queen. One of those things was seen as being against the country. The other was seen as tricky dinner talk. Let's start with Piers Gaveston, Edward's childhood friend, Mabelover, and all-the-time style star. Piers was not just near to Edward, he was moved up to jobs of silly power, given homes, names, and shiny things that truly matched none of his clothes. At Edward's crowning, Piers had on more glitter than the kingly jewels, and wasphenseer than the queen. Which is a big move when your life rests on rich men not disliking you. Guess what? They disliked him. Edward's wife, Isabella of France, was surely very mod. She came with political wants and a lot of money, neither of which meant sharing big chair with her husband's best pal, maybe boyfriend. Edward, though, stayed true. When the rich men asked for Piers to be sent away, Edward pouted, sent him off, then got them right back, like a young person's breakup, but with big houses and bows and arrows. After a while, the lords had seen enough and killed Piers. Edward was heartbroken. Think a huge, kingly, sad time. Sad clothes, crying in public. The whole old-time sad story. Hissedness, though, did not make him think about himself. It just made space for a new top friend, Hugh Despenser, the younger. Hugh made Piers look like a small side note. He was not just Edward's helper. He was pretty much the second king. Land, names, whole big areas. Hugh received them. The rest of the rich men got mad. Isabella, by this time, changed from a mad wife to a full-on payback hero. She joined with a lover of her own. Edward's foe, of course, came to England and took over from her husband. Edward was put in a locked room, his crown taken, and maybe killed by a red-hot metal stick. Yes, that story is out there. No, we are not talking about how it works. Let's just say old-time payback was not often quiet. Edward II's rule was less about running things and more about personal fuss. So strong, it could be a reality show. If the plant had Netflix, his show would have been stopped in 3 countries. His error, mixing ruling with feelings, not listening to anyone else, and thinking kingly power meant no one could harm him. It turns out everyone could in the end. Wenceslas of Bohemia was king in the late 14th century, though was king might be a kindword. He by name had titles like King of the Romans and King of Bohemia, but his true doings were more like being nude in public, loud drinking, and making trouble in his own big house. If you are thinking of good King Wenceslas from the Christmas song, wrong, man. That was his old family. This Wenceslas, not good, not even a little bit nice. He started with good signs, crowned as a young man, smart, speaking many tongues, and able. But somewhere on the path, he thought the kingly drink room was more helpful than the money room, and started to rule from the bottom of a cup. Wenceslas got a name for having multi-day drink times. His helpers started to bring flasks, not to have a drink, but to live through talks. At the castle, talks often finished with someone pushing a table over or being asked to a fight using breadsticks. Truth Castle, sometimes during a meeting. One writer says Wenceslas gave kingly orders with no clothes on, except for a sword holder. His reason, clothes are for the shy. Harto say no to that kind of thinking when the man with the crown also has a big sword and no pants. In love, he liked bar girls, laundry ladies, and sometimes rich men's wives, though he seemed more into their drink ideas than their feelings. Love affairs were not a big deal at his home. They were almost like job talks. One rich man said he charmed his sister. Wenceslas just moved his shoulders and gave him a drink. After a while, the Holy Roman Empire thought they had seen enough of his kingly vodka and took him off as king of the Romans. A nice way of saying you are let go, but we are saying it is for ruling. Even his own brother said he was no good, with no clothes, and often sleeping. Still, Wenceslas somehow was king in Bohemia for many years. In the end, he left a wobbly country, a full drink room, and a kingly story best said as he ruled like every day was his last bad morning. Henry VIII of England is what you get when big power meets big feelings. He was king from 1509 to 1547, and used most of it either wedding someone, ending a wedding, or getting upset with the Pope for not helping his tricky dating choices. You have heard the little song, divorced, head off, died, divorced, head off, lived. But that barely tells the start of Henry's kingly love story turned scary show. Let's begin with Catherine of Aragon, wife number 1. Wed, Henry thought God was angry with him for not having a boy baby. Of course, the answer was not thinking inside. It was a marriage end, being kicked out of church, and making a brand new church. He made up Anglicanism just to date another person. That is not love. That is being mean with a big church. Then came Anne Boleyn, wife number 2. Henry sent her love notes, full of strong feeling, love, and really not good poems. She gave him a girl, Elizabeth, who would later be one of England's top queens, but no boys. This led to her being taken for cheating, magic, and maybe giving looks at the castle. Her head was cut off. Henry went on with the feelings of a potato. Henry was very sad for her, by which we mean he stayed a proper 11 days bore, looking for wife number 4. Next was Anne of Cleves, who Henry picked from Anish picture. Face to face, he said she was like a Flanders horse. That wedding was for 6 months, and finished in what we would now call a noble marriage end, and a nicely said Yelp note. Howard, wife number 5, was a lot younger, and much less keep. She was killed for cheating, though really it is hard to blame her. Being wed to Henry at that time meant handling sore feet, fear, and a man who could hardly move, but still said he was a present to ladies. Last, Catherine Parr, wife 6, who smartly lived longer than him by being able to read, patient, and very good at avoiding blame. By the time Henry passed away, he had made England poor, eaten half its farm animals, and made the kingly home into a sad show where heads came off more than wedding rings. In short, Henry VIII loved a lot, ruled a lot, and left a trail of fuss so known it is still being made into plays. Francis I of France, able to keep his pants on. To his good side, he was a great helper of the arts. He asked Leonardo da Vinci to France, made wonderful big houses, and helped make France a top place for art. But while the artists were arting, the poem writers were poeming, Francis was busy charming anything with a heartbeat and a name. His home was known, or maybe not known, for its riches, but also for being a kind of country-paid dating place. He had gentle ladies of the sleeping room. A Namathat should have meant waiting girls, but really meant love shortlist. Were messed up because Francis, by mistake, went to bed with the helper's wife. And this was not quiet, soft cheating. Francis was loud about it. He once said to people from other lands that French kings were meant to be great lovers. Which sounds nice, till you know it was from a man who saw deals and sweethearts with the same amount off care, which is to say, for a short time. His most known affair was with Francoise de Foix, a rich lady who became his official sweetheart. She was smart, schooled, and maybe the only lady who could joke about him in public and live. In the end, replaced because off course she was. Then came and Pisalou Daily, a lady whose name is like an old-time inside joke, and whose ruling power was only as good as her skill to last longer than Theodore's. Even his foes could not help but see. The Holy Roman Emperor Charles V once said Francis was more unsafe in the sleeping room than on the fighting field. He said "Ita's a mean thing." Francis probably saw it as a nice thing, and somehow, in the mix of affairs, dinners, and what can only be called ruling flirting, Francis still found a way to rule well, though his fights cost a lot, and his taste in ladies even more so. The man was, if nothing else, very excited. His rule was a fast spin of soft cloth trouble and used perfume. Francis I was not just a king. He was France's most charming historical problem. And truly, he would not want it any other way. Alfonso XI of Castile was king from 1312 to 1350, and he had one big fun thing besides ruling a country, not paying attention to his wife in the most open, big way he could. His poor, politically smart wife was Maria of Portugal, rich, with good friends, and sadly not Leonor de Guzman, the lady Alfonso really liked. Leonor was a Castilian rich lady with a quick brain, 10 children, and enough power to basically run the home herself. And not like Maria, she did not need a crown to feel big. She just needed Alfonso's full and open love. Now, most kings had sweethearts. Alfonso made his into a shadow queen. He made Leonor big houses, gave her land, brought her everywhere. At the same time, Queen Maria was left to sit by herself at kingly parties like an extra table flower, while Alfonso made loving eyes across the room at his side girl, who was not even attempting to be quiet about it, to make stuff worse or better. Based on your feelings for old-time sad stories, Leonor was not just a sweetheart. She was busy in ruling, talking deals, getting respect, and having babies like it was her all-the-time job, which, let's be real, it kind of was. Alfonso said no to even acting like Maria was important. In fact, he and Lee spent moments with her once, and it was just for political looks. After that, he went back to Leonor's home like a man who did not like being wed. This was not okay with Dad, who was the king of Portugal. At one time, country relations got so tight over the whole thing that a fight almost started. Think of your in-laws being so upset about your sweetheart. They think about a military fight, but Alfonso did not mind. Hecapt showing Leonore around the home like a kingly prize, and probably would have done it forever if the Black Death had not killed him in 1350. That is correct. It needed a real sickness to stop his affair. After Alfonso passed away, Queen Maria at last had her time. She had Leonore put in a locked room and killed in a move that history people call payback, and most of us would call very right. Alfonso's rule may be known for winning fights, but let's be true. His real story was being one of the most openly controlled kings in old-time history. Philip IV of France, also called Philip the Handsome, and no, not in the nice way, was king from 1285 to 1314. His name came from his nice looks, which were sadly not matched by nice actions. On the outside, Philip was holy, quiet, and all about doing good things. On the inside, he was running a country like it was a very tight reality show, full o' flies, hidden trials, and a good amount of double rules, especially in the sleeping roomeria. His most not good trouble was the Tour de Nesle affair, an old-time love trouble, so bad it could have been written by HBO. It all began when Philip's girl, Isabella, yes, Thussam, one who would later take over from Edward II of England, saw that her sisters-in-law were being a little too close with some brave men, too close friendly, like giving gift sand, secret tower meetings, friendly. Isabella told on them to Philip, who started a kingly check with all the quietness of a big hammer. Two of the princesses wed to Philip's boys were found to have cheated and publicly locked up for years, their heads shaved, their names taken away, and their good names totally ruined. The two brave men involved, hurt, skinned, and killed in the public square, because nothing says good leading like making a family trouble into an old-time killing film. Now, here is where stuff gets fun. While Philip was giving out mean punishments, like sweets, stories flew that he himself kept a few sweethearts hidden away in private rooms of the Louvre, no less. Some said Thath had a secret group of young ladies who were there to please visiting important people, for ruling, of course, but not like his daughters-in-law. No one ever asked about Thaking's private loves, because when you are the one making the rules, it is amazing how bad things become smart moves. Philip also had a special skill for using religion when it worked for him. He went after the Knights Templar for so-called bad beliefs, but all knew it was for their money. It was the old-time way of taking your money, man, and calling it God's justice. So yes, Philip may have seemed like a picture of holy ways and honor, but behind that nice jaw and kingly look was a man with a deep love for lying and a good idea of where all the castle's hidden doors were. Sigismund of Luxembourg, King of Hungary, King of the Romans, and in the end, Holy Roman Emperor, was the type of man who gathered crowns the way other men gathered drink cups, which he also gathered a lot, ruling from the late 14th to mid-15th century. Sigismund was smart, spoke many tongues, and good at ruling. He also had a personal life, so Badit would make a bar singer red in the face. To start, Sigismund was wed to Queen Mary of Hungary, a strong lady in her own way, but being wed to Sigismund was more of a nice formality. He liked his loves less lawful, more often, and hopefully not followed by talk. His loving side jobs included rich ladies, laundry ladies, and at least one Italian opera singer, long before opera was a thing, which shows his new thinking. Court helpers often lost count of his sweethearts. not because there were a lot, but because they changed so often. Some history people say they just started to give them numbers. At Thehome, his sweethearts had their own rooms, helpers, and in one case, a private praying room, which is either very loving or just very not right, based on how you feel about praying next to someone's sweetheart. Sigismund also had a love for fake clothes, mainly dressing as a normal person and going into towns. Sometimes it was for spying. Semetamesto flirt with local ladies by acting like a very tall seller. It seems no one thought this was strange, even though he was the only seller with a full group of helpers with kingly marks. And yet the man ruled for many years, started holy wars, had the Council of Constance, and fixed imperial ruling, all while having loves that would make even Casanova say, "Slow down, mate." One helper once wrote that Sigismund says hello to all ladies as the same, especially in private, which, while a bit ahead of its time, also sounded a lot like NHR problem. But despite his extra fun, Sigismund was still very liked, mostly because he found a way to look kingly in public, while quietly having the messiest love life in Europe. He was not just an emperor, he was a one-man, new age, equal parts planner, ruler, and troubadour, and somehow he always got away with it. Louis XV of France, known as Louis the Loved, was king from 1715 to 1774. And B was king. We mostly mean he had a kingly after-party where ruling wassa choice and soft bed covers were not. He began well enough, young, good-looking, and ready to follow the story of his great-grandfather, Louis XIV. But somewhere in his 20s, Louis thought country plans could wait, because he had a long list of Ladison waiting to see to. Let's talk about the Parc aux Cerfs, the quiet small house near Versailles that Louis used for, let's say, private tryouts. Girls were found, usually poor but nice looking, brought in quietly and moved around like seasonal fruits. There were so many sweethearts. The palace guards probably had a clipboard list. His most known sweetheart, Madame de Pompadour, was not just a nice face. She pretty much ran France from the side. But when she lost interest in the body part of their love Lucette, that is okay, and made a second group of girls. The thinking, keep Pompadour for brains and talk, keep the parquet for all other things. It was all very neat mess. Each girl got gifts, names, and in some cases, quiet homes once their time was up. It was France's most unofficial, but strangely, good intern program. And the queen, Maria Luciska, she was present somewhere, mostly not noticed. Once she stopped having babies, Louis saw her like old furniture, too much money to get rid of, but not a part of the room anymore. The trouble at court was so normal that rich men did not ask if Decking had a sweetheart. They asked how many this week. Even people from other lands talked in their letters about the turnover rate at Versailles. That is not a monarchy. That is a Brethel with better clothes. Funnily, Louis truly thought he was a good ruler between fancy balls, quiet baby news, and strange, quiet times with his wife. His rule, while not a huge mess, set the mood for his grandson, Louis XVI, who would later lose his head, maybe because Grandpa used too much time thinking with the wrong crown. In the end, Louis XV left a debt-filled France, a sad court, and a kingly name that could best be said as loved by ladies. Disliked by money men. Christian VII of Denmark was king from 1766 to 1808. though was king might be too strong a word. Wobbled through life while other people ran the country is probably more, right? You see, Christian had a few problems. He had a bad mind sickness, probablish a freon, and was not very into the whole being king thing, unless it meant running gafter helpers with forks, which he, it seems, thought was funny. This made him more of a kingly pet than a ruler. Now, Christian had a wife, Caroline Matilda of Great Britain, a smart young lady who hoped for a somewhat normal wedding. What she got was a husband who liked touching himself in public, speaking to his hand, and vanishing during state dinners to ride pretend horses down palace halls. It is not clear what failed first, her patience or his hold on what was real. Then came Johann Friedrich Strunzi, Thieking's doctor, smart, wanting power, and very into power. Strunzi fast became their ruler of Denmark, and, a bit strangely, the lover of the queen. Yes, that is right. Caroline Matilda went full sad story and started a love affair with her husband's doctor, and the king did not see or care. Strunzi wrote the laws, signed the papers, and kept Christian busy with puppet shows, sword fun, and gentle pushes away from pointy things. It was maybe the only love triangle in history where one point was just softly humming Toe himself in the back. Caroline and Strunzi even had a baby together. Maybe the king's in paper, for sure not his in real life. For a time, the two ran Denmark like a very new, a little bit bad think tank. But kingly homes are not often calm places. In the end, Christian's jealous mother-in-law learned of the affair and took over. Strunzi was taken, hurt, and killed quite bigly, while Caroline was sent away with her good name in pieces. As for Christian, he went back to being a softly watched problem, using the rest off his rule in a kind of padded quiet. His rule is known less for good things and more for the pure strangeness of it all. A king who ruled nothing, a queen who tried her best, and a doctor who tried a little too much. History calls it a ruling crisis. We call it Europe's weirdest love story. Charles II of England, who was king from 1660 to 1685, returned from being sent away with one clear plan: bring back fun, hopefully with as many sweethearts as a person could have. Spoiler, plan done. After living through a country fight, hiding in big trees, and being poor on the continent, Charles came back to England as king, and right away the country needed a little less plainness and a little more clothes-off ballroom dancing. Parliament slowly agreed, called the Merry Monarch. Charles had many officials wizards, and those are just the ones we have heard of. His most known love was Neville, a quick-talking actress who once called herself the Protestant just to stand out from all the other sweethearts. Honestly, great branding. Then there was Barbara Palmer, named Countess of Castlemaine, who was less sweetheart and more house thing. She was apparently kept in kingly rooms and had a few children by Charles, all of whom were given names and land because family favoritism is more fun when it is flirty. Charles did not even act like he was being quiet. He brought his sweethearts to court parties. He gave them government money. He even had a hall built at Whitehall so they could get to his slipping room without bothering the helpers. Smartness. Your name is Charles. Queen Catherine of Braganza, his long-waiting wife, handled it all with quiet grace and maybe a flask. She had no children, and Charles was said to have said she could not have babies, but she never gave me problems. which is both a nice thing and a bad sign. Charles was the father of at least 14 non-official children and knew most of them, giving them rich names and having big birthday parties. At the same time, the official line had no bobbies, as if fate had a funny bone. Despite the troubles, Charles was liked. He opened at theaters, made fun legal, and brought back monarchy with style, wigs, and more. I McCoopthan, his actresses. The people let him off for everything, mostly because he made Monarcha look like a party. When he passed away, his last words were, "Let not poor Nelly go hungry, not God bless England, not tell my brother to rule well, just feed the sweetheart." And that, friends, tells all about Charles II, a king who ruled like he was having achingly bachelor show finale. Eric XIV of Sweden was king from 1560 to 1568, a brief rule, but long enough to leave a story of fear, poems, and really, really bad dating choices. Now Eric began with promise, tall, good-looking, liked stars and the arts, the kind of king who might write you a love poem and then talk about planets over dinner. He was also very into star reading, so he did not often make choices without looking at the stars first. Sadly, Festers never said to him to calm down. Eric liked rich ladies, but not in the quiet, talkin' a garden kind of way. He asked Queen Elizabeth I of England to wed him many times, and she said no, again and again, nicely, then strongly, then with total quiet. Eric did not get the message and even sent pictures of himself as gifts, which is the 16th century way of sending someone a message with a no-shirt picture and a wedding paper. After Elizabeth ignored him, Eric looked lower in rank, not in excitement. He liked Karine Manstater, a normal person, and the girl of a jailkeeper. This shocked the rich people, which only made Eric try harder. He wed her, crowned her queen, and then you said the next year, having sad breakdowns, locking up rich men, and poking people, he thought, looked at her in a funny way. His most not good moment, the Stour murders, a normal dinner party that finished with Eric by himself killing a rich man with a knife, while yelling things that made his court helpers wonder if star reading had finally broken his mind. Only lady who could joke about him in public and live. In the end, replaced because of course she was. Then came and Depisalou Diley, a lady whose name is like an old-time inside joke, and whose ruling power was only as good as her skill to last longer than Theodor's. Even his foes could not help but see. The Holy Roman Emperor Charles V once said Francis was more unsafe in the sleeping room than on the fighting field. He said "Ita's a mean thing." Francis probably saw it as a nice thing, and somehow, in the mix of affairs, dinners, and what can only be called ruling flirting, Francis still found a way to rule well, though his fights cost a lot, and his taste in ladies even more so. The man was, if nothing else, very excited. His rule was a fast spin of soft cloth trouble and used perfume. Francis I was not just a king. He was France's most charming historical problem, and truly, he would not want it any other way. Alfonso XI of Castile was king from 1312 to 1350, and he had one big fun thing besides ruling a country, not paying attention to his wife in the most open, big way he could. His poor, politically smart wife was Maria of Portugal, rich, with good friends, and sadly not Leonor de Guzman, the lady Alfonso really liked. Leonore was a Castilian rich lady with a quick brain, 10 children, and enough power to basically run the home herself. And not like Maria, she did not need a crown to feel big. She just needed Alfonso's full and open love. Now, most kings had sweethearts. Alfonso made his into a shadow queen. He made Leonore big houses, gave her land, brought her everywhere. At the same time, Queen Maria was left to sit by herself at kingly parties like an extra table flower, while Alfonso made loving eyes across the room at his side girl, who was not even attempting to be quiet about it, to make stuff worse or better. Based on your feelings for old-time sad stories, Leonore was not just a sweetheart. She was busy in ruling, talking deals, getting respect, and having babies like it was her all-the-time job, which, let's be real, it kind of was. Alfonso said no to even acting like Maria was important. In fact, he and Lee spent moments with her once, and it was just for political looks. After that, he went back to Leonore's home like a man who did not like being wed. This was not okay with Dad, who was the king of Portugal. At one time, country relations got so tight over the whole thing that a fight almost started. Think of your in-laws being so upset about your sweetheart. They think about a military fight, but Alfonso did not mind. Hecate showing Leonore around the home like a kingly prize, and probably would have done it forever if the Black Death had not killed him in 1350. That is correct. It needed a real sickness to stop his affair. After Alfonso passed away, Queen Maria at last had her time. She had Leonore put in a locked room and killed in a move that history people call payback, and most of us would call very right. Alfonso's rule may be known for winning fights, but let's be true. His real story was being one of the most openly controlled kings in old-time history. Philip IV of France, also called Philip the Handsome, and no, not in the nice way, was king from 1285 to 1314. His name came from his nice looks, which were sadly not matched by nice actions. On the outside, Philip was holy, quiet, and all about doing good things. On the inside, he was running a country like it was a very tight reality show, full of flies, hidden trials, and a good amount of double rules, especially in the sleeping roomeria. His most not good trouble was the Tour de Nesle affair, an old-time love trouble, so bad it could have been written by HBO. It all began when Philip's girl, Isabella, yes, Thussam, one who would later take over from Edward II of England, saw that her sisters-in-law were being a little too close with some brave men, too close friendly, like giving gifts and secret tower meetings friendly. Isabella told on them to Philip, who started a kingly check with all the quietness of a big hammer. 2 of the princesses wed to Philip's boys were found to have cheated and publicly locked up for years, their heads shaved, their names taken away, and their good names totally ruined. The 2 brave men involved, hurt, skinned, and killed in the public square, because nothing says good leading like making a family trouble into an old-time killing film. Now, here is where stuff gets fun. While Philip was giving out mean punishments, like sweets, stories flew that he himself kept a few sweethearts hidden away in private rooms of the Louvre, no less. Some said Thath had a secret group of young ladies who were there to please visiting important people, for ruling, of course, but not like his daughters-in-law. No one ever asked about Thaking's private loves. Because when you are the one making the rules, it is amazing how bad things become smart moves. Philip also had a special skill for using religion when it worked for him. He went after the Knights Templar for so-called bad beliefs, but all knew it was for their money. It was the old-time way of taking your money, man, and calling it God's justice. So yes, Philip may have seemed like a picture of holy ways and honor. But behind that nice jaw and kingly look was a man with a deep love for lying and a good idea of where all the castle's hidden doors were. Sigismund of Luxembourg, King of Hungary, King of the Romans, and in the end, Holy Roman Emperor, was the type of man who gathered crowns the way other men gathered drink cups, which he also gathered a lot. Ruling from the late 14th to mid-15th century, Sigismund was smart, spoke many tongues, and good at ruling. He also had a personal life, so Badit would make a bar singer red in the face. To start, Sigismund was wed to Queen Mary of Hungary, a strong lady in her own way, but being wed to Sigismund was more of a nice formality. He liked his loves less lawful, more often, and hopefully not followed by talk. His loving side jobs included rich ladies, laundry ladies, and at least one Italian opera singer, long before opera was a thing, which shows his new thinking. Court helpers often lost count of his sweethearts, not because there were a lot, but because they changed so often. Some history people say they just started to give them numbers. At the home, his sweethearts had their own rooms, helpers, and in one case, a private praying room, which is either very loving or just very not right, based on how you feel about praying next to someone's sweetheart. Sigismund also had a love for fake clothes, mainly dressing as a normal person and going into towns. Sometimes it was for spying. Mesto flirt with local ladies by acting like a very tall seller. It seems no one thought this was strange, even though he was the only seller with a full group of helpers with kingly marks. And yet the man ruled for many years, started holy wars, had the Council of Constance, and fixed imperial ruling, all while having loves that would make even Casanova say, "Slow down, mate." One helper once wrote that Sigismund says hello to all ladies as the same, especially in private, which, while a bit ahead of its time, also sounded a lot like an HR problem. But despite his extra fun, Sigismund was still very liked, mostly because he found a way to look kingly in public, while quietly having the messiest love life in Europe. He was not just an emperor, he was a one-man, new age, equal parts planner, ruler, and troubadour, and somehow he always got away with it. Louis XV of France, known as Louis the Loved, was king from 1715 to 1774. And B was king. We mostly mean he had a kingly after-party where ruling was a choice and soft bed covers were not. He began well enough, young, good-looking, and ready to follow the story of his great-grandfather, Louis XIV. But somewhere in his 20s, Louis thought country plans could wait, because he had a long list of Ladison waiting to see to. Let's talk about the Parc aux Cerfs, the quiet small house near Versailles that Louis used for, let's say, private tryouts. Girls were found, usually poor but nice looking, brought in quietly and moved around like seasonal fruits. There were so many sweethearts. The palace guards probably had a clipboard list. His most known sweetheart, Madame de Pompadour, was not just a nice face. She pretty much ran France from the side. But when she lost interest in the body part of their love, Luce, that is okay, and made a second group of girls. The thinking, keep Pompadour for brains and talk, keep the parquet for all other things. It was all very neat mess. Each girl got gifts, names, and in some cases, quiet homes once their time was up. It was France's most unofficial, but strangely good intern program. And the queen, Maria Luciska, she was present somewhere, mostly not noticed. Once she stopped having babies, Louis saw her like old furniture, too much money to get rid of, but not a part of the room anymore. The trouble at court was so normal that rich men did not ask if Decking had a sweetheart. They asked how many this week. Even people from other lands talked in their letters about the turnover rate at Versailles. That is not a monarchy. That is a Brethel with better clothes. Funnily, Louis truly thought he was a good ruler between fancy balls, quiet baby news, and strange, quiet times with his wife. His rule, while not a huge mess, set the mood for his grandson, Louis XVI, who would later lose his field, monks with no monk house, money men with no country. And while their money boxes got fuller, so did the weight of being watched. Power with no one watching, that is wankings, start to sharpen knives. For all their power, the Templars were in a losing fight. The Crusader states, Outremer, were castles made of sand, always hit by the waves of Islamic return. And leading that wave was Saladin, the smart sultan of Egypt and Syria. Unlike the messy and often mean Crusader lords, Saladin was a joining force, and he had one aim: take back Jerusalem in 1187. That aim was met at the Battle of Hattin. The Templars were there fighting to thievery end, but they were beaten, outsmarted, outnumbered, and trapped in the hot heat. The Christian army was destroyed. Saladin took hundreds of brave men. Most were paid for, but when it came to the Templars, no kindness. He killed almost all of them. To Saladin, they were too unsafe to keep living. The loss of Jerusalem was not just a military hit, it was a spiritual problem. The city they had promised to keep safe was gone. The Holy Sepulchre was back in Muslim hands, and with it, the Templars' first reason had to fall. Still, they got back together. The Third Holy War brought help, and Richard the Lionheart, who respected and used the Templars in battle. But even he could not get back Jerusalem. Over the next 100 years, the Crusader states got smaller like dying coals. One by one, cities were lost: Antioch, Tripoli, and at last Acre in 1291. The last Templar strong place in the Holy Land was lost. They went back to Cyprus, where they made new main offices and tried to stay important. But something had changed. They were still fighters, but with no Holy Land left to keep safe. What were they fighting for? Their castles were empty. Their stories grew old. Their order, once their mark, started to go. At the same time, other groups, like the Hospitallers, got stronger. Talks of pride, badness, and being rude followed the Templars across Europe. Some said they had become too rich, too secret. Others said they were keeping relics, unsafe ones. The East had made them, shaped them, broken them, and now without it, the Templars were lost. They still had their riches, their network, their feeling of power, but they had lost the thing that Modatham needed: a sword with no war, a group with no holy war. And in that space, powerful foes were looking. By the start of the 14th century, the Knights Templar were still rich, still feared, and still powerful. But for the first time in their past, they were also not needed. The Holy Land was gone. No more holy wars were coming soon. They had become a military group with no war, a religious group with no clear job, and a money giant that answered to no king, and that made them a mark. No one looked at them with more doubt or wanting than King Philip IV of France, known as Philip the Fair. He was not called fair for hissance of right. He was deep in money trouble, broke from fights with England and Flanders and the Templars. They were his moneylenders. He had taken huge amounts from them to pay for his armies and keep his throne. But Philip did not like being in money trouble, especially men he could not rule. Worse, the Templars were politically free. They answered on Lido the Pope, not to the crown. They had land in France, but gave no money to the king. They had their own strong places, their own courts, their own armies. To Philip, they were a dangerous state inside his state, not touchable, not movable, and very, very rich. So he started to plan. Philip's word machine started working. Stories spread that the Templar sprayed to idols, spit on the cross, did bad starting acts. No proof, just talks. But in a time of old beliefs, talks were enough. He pushed his puppet pope, Clement V, making the papacy look into it. Clement waited, but Philip was not waiting. In secret, Philip planned one of the most together mass takings in old-time history. He picked a day, got his soldiers, readied his herders, and on one chilly Friday morning in October 1307, Friday the 13th, he hit all over France. Templar brave men were taken, asked, put in jail, hurt. Confessions were made. Some broke in hours. Others fought until their bedeeded. It was lying wrapped in holy rite, and it worked. The people, once on their side, started to change. The Pope, pushed and made to feel small, found himself in a corner. The tide had changed, not in a fight, but in ruling, and the fighter monks, who once rodento enemy lines, now sat in chains in dark rooms, blamed for bad things that no sword could fight. October 13th, 1307, the day that forever made Friday the 13th bad in the Western mind at sunrise. Across every part of France, armed men moved with no sound. Their orders were simple. Take every Templar you can get. No heads up, no fighting back allowed. Theokin's justice had come, with swords out and papers sealed in secret. Thousands of brave men were pulled from their beds, some in full armor, others in prayer. Grand Master Jacques de Maule was taken in Paris, lied to by the very country whose crown jewels he had once kept safe. Across cities and country, Templar commanderies were broken into, their safes opened up, and their bookrooms taken. The blames were wild, bad beliefs, idle praying, spitting on the cross, sodomy, devil acts. Most of it was made up Halaby Philip's lawyers. But in a time of fear and religious heat, it did not have to be real. It just had to be something you could believe. And the Templars, they were silenced with fire and metal. Torture rooms lit up across France. Men were pulled, burned, crushed, skinned, until their words dripped from them like blood. They said yes to whatever their askers wanted, that they said no to Christ, that they prayed to a cut-off head named Baphomet, that they kissed each other in secret events. Under great pain, even Grand Master de Maule said yes, then later took it back. It was a show, acting like justice. A king killing his moneylenders by blaming them of sins so bad no one dared help them. The Pope Clement V was made to feel small. He had tried to help, but Philip had moved too quick, too meanly, pushed into a corner. Clement ordered his own look. Other countries like England and Spain waited. In many cases, the blames were let go or the Templars set free. But in France, the machine of blame kept going. Philip took their riches, though much of it, strangely, went away. Some said the Templars had moved their treasure. Still others said the real treasure was not gold, but knowing, secrets, relics, the Holy Grail, the Ark of the Covenant. Whatever's truth, the harm was done. The Templars were no longer a group of brothers. They were runners, prisoners, dead men walking. The king had made his move, not with armies, but with ink, fire, and lies. And the world would never see the Red Cross the same way again. By 1312, the finish was sure. The Knights Templar, once the most powerful military group in Christendom, had been made into broken men in dark rooms. Their confessions, pulled out under pain, were used as a reason for what came after. And what came after was ending. Under strong push from King Philip IV, Pope Clement V formally broke up Templar order at the Council of Vienne in March 1312. The papal paper vox in excelso took their names, their things, and their very being. Officially, the Templars were gone. The Holy See said it an act of kindness, not a finding of guilt, but a needed move. Toast up more trouble. In truth, it was a political killing dressed in church clothes. Theaters, things were given to the Knights Hospitaller, but not all of it got there. Mucheth, the Templars, riches, treasures, books, and rumored relics just went away. Some sedite was hidden. Others thought it was quietly taken by Philip's money room. Whatever Thackeis, the Templars' huge money world disappeared like smoke, leaving behind only questions. But the last part had not yet happened. In 1314, Grand Master Jacques de Maule, who hadst 7 long years in jail, was brought out to a stage in Paris. He was to be killed with Geoffroy de Charny, another top Templar. Both had taken back their confessions, saying until the end that the order was not guilty, and for that fighting back they would have burned. They were tied to a wood stick on a little island in the Seine. As the fires went up, de Maule yelled through the smoke, asking God to judge those who had found him. As the story goes, he cursed both King Philip and Pope Clement, saying they would pass away in the year, and they did. Clement died from sickness in a month. Philip Camafter, later that year, fast and with no sign. Some said it was God's justice. Others scalded chance, but the myth stayed. The Templars had died cursing their killers, and the skies had heard. With that, the last real voice of the Knights Templar was silenced in fire. Their story finished not in a fight, but in lies, pain, and flame. Yet, even Asti were taken off the map. Their legend was just starting to grow. The fires of the Templar killings went out, but the hot coals of their legend burn it hotter than ever. With the order broken up, their castles taken, and their leaders killed, it seemed their story was done. But something odd occurred. Instead of going away from us, the Knights Templar changed from shamed monks into endless signs of mystery and power. The secrecy that had once kept them safe now made rumors. What became of their treasure? Where were their papers, their relics, their holy knowing? Some thought the Templars had taken away the Holy Grail before they were taken. Others said they had hidden the Ark of the Covenant or kept watch over family of Jesus himself. There was no proof, just shadows. But in the old-time world, shadows were enough. Then came the thought that Templars had lived on underground, though for real broken up. Many old Templars quietly mixed into life. Some joined other monk groups. Some became paid fighters. Beautithers, the story said, went secret. They made hidden groups of brothers, keeping their axe and relics in quiet, waiting for their time. Hundreds of years later, those stories changed into myths. The Templars were given credit or blame for everything from the Mackingoff Gothic cathedrals to the start of Freemasonry. Secret idea stories grew like weeds that the Templars ruled banks, thrones, big changes, that they had never really been beaten, just hidden. That behind every big thing in history, some hidden hand in a white coat. The way pop culture did not help. The Templars were in books, games, films, some Artemises, good guys, other times as bad guys. Assassin's Creed made them a world group, controlling the strings off life. Each new telling changed the truth, but fed the interest. In real life, the Templars swear, flesh and blood, brave, yes, flawed. Surely religious fighters who tried to mix monk promises with the roughness of war and paid the price. But myths last because they give us something history often can't. Answers, meaning, mystery. The real Templars passed Awayan stages and in dark rooms. But the storybook Templars, they still ride in the mind, forever, armored and covered in secrecy. And in that way, Philip the Fair did not win. He destroyed their bodies, but their legend is untouchable. More than 700 years have gone by since the last Grand Master of the Knights Templar was burned to death on the sides of the Seine. But the Red Cross still stays in books, in buildings, in signs carved into old rock and talked through secret ID stories. The Templars may be gone, but their story is anything but dead. They were Morathon just fighters. They were new thinkers. In a time when kings still ruled by God's will and banking was seen as a bad thing, the Templars made a pan-European web of money, moving things, and talking to others. Their letters of credit were like modern checks. Their commanderies worked like regional parts of a multi-country company. They were an early plan for globalization, made not with stock markets, but with swords and holy promises. In fighting, they changed what it meant to be a brave man. Before the Templars, Chivalrous was a personal code, easy to bend and often not followed. The Templars made Itinto a group, a discipline kept with mean sameness. They were not single champions fighting for fame. They were groups trained like modern special forces, ready to die for a thought idea, and die they did, often in quiet, sometimes for nothing, but never without a mark. Culturally, they changed how the West saw religion and fighting. The idea of the fighter monk challenged the thought that holiness and roughness were not able to be together. They showed that belief could be a weapon, not just in a fight, but in ruling money and getting people to believe things. And when they fell, it was that same belief in their so-called bad beliefs that was the reason for their killing. Their fall also, Wassa, warning story. The Templars became a sign of power with no check, answering to no one, kept safe by the Pope, richer than kings. Their fall showed the weakness of groups, Evanthos wrapped in God's power. It was an old-time version of a company takeover, done not by share owners, but by royalty and Rome. Today their picture is more myth than man, but myths make memory. And the memory of the Templars, brave, flawed, lied to, reminds you that history is not just written in winds. Sometimes it is carved in ash. So the next time you see a red cross on white cloth, remember it was once worn by men who thought they were doing God's work until ruling, wanting, and fear decided otherwise. And in that crash of steel, gold, and fire, their legend was made. In 12th century Paris, the world was shifting. Trade paths were getting bigger, schools were getting taller, and the church was showing its power like never before. It was a time of big dreams, political, spiritual, building. And in the middle of this growing city stood a dream made of rock. That dream was Maurice de Sully's, the Bishop of Paris, Picardy, 1160. He was not just a man of God, he was a man with a vision. The current Cathedral Saint-Étienne was falling apart and not amazing. Paris was getting bigger, and its religio center needed to match the city's size. So de Sully dreamed bigger, much bigger. He suggested a cathedral so huge, so amazing, it would make everything around it look small. A building not just for the Virgin Mary, but to the power and fame of the Catholic Church in France. This would not be a Romanesque, strong place like the ones before it. It would be something new, something bold, something Gothic. In 1163, that dream started to become real. As the story goes, Pope Alexander III himself put the first rock during a special blessing. Building started on the eastern side, the choir and apse, where priests would one day sing songs under high arches of glass and rock. But this was no normal build. Notre Dame was not just a building. It was a promise for many lifetimes. And people of Paris, rock masons, iron workers, woodworkers, and artists started Thejib. They pulled limestone from close by rock pits, shaped it with old-time tools, and put up wood frames that touched the skies. Every block was put by hand. Every carving, every window, every rib of the top, made with patience, belief, and sweat. It would take years to finish even the first parts. Workers worked, knowing they would not be alive to see the towers done. Sons got chisels from fathers. Lifetimes passed with Notre Dame, still growing slowly, wonderfully, above the Parisian sky. But for Bishop de Sully, Thiam was clear: to build a house of God so great that just walking in it would make Thossel feel small. Notre Dame was never meant to be just a church. It was an act of praise carved in rock, a showing of what people could build when it aimed for the sky. The first rock was only the start. What happened next would change the skyline and the soul of old-time Europe. As the 1170s went on, Notre Dame started to grow, not as a building, but as a sign. In a city of small wood houses and dirty streets, the cathedral slowly took shape, growing over the skyline like a rock lesson. The Gothic style, still very new, was about to change what churches could be. Not just places of prayer, but tools of wonder. The work went from east to west, starting with the choir, where priests would one day do holy acts, and then to the nave, the big open area for the normal faithful. The building was new, the walls were thinner, the tops higher, the pointy arches let more weight be moved down, and those ribbed vaults, they did not just hold the top, they sang up. pulling the ion, the soul, up to heaven. But maybe the most bold thought was light. Not like the dark Romanesque churches of old, Notre Dame was built to shine. Big stained glass windows started to show up, letting colored light into holy shapes. Pictures from holy books came to life with the morning sun. Every part of Notre Dame had a meaning. The poles were not just holders, they showed saints. The archways were not just for looks, they were paths to being saved. The rock was theology, and the masons were its writers. At the same time, outside the walls, Paris was changing. The cathedral became a heartbeat. Shops gathered around it. Lessons echoed across the Seine. Students from the growing University of Paris met in its shadow. Notre Dame was not just a building. It was becoming the Soulaf, the city. Yet work was slow. There were no big machines, no power tools, just muscle, wood frames, and endless will. Hundreds of workers worked year after year. When one passed away, another took his spot. Names were not often written down. Their prize was not fame, but belief. They built not for them, but for God and lifetimes to come. By 1200, the choir and much of the nave stood high. The shape of a wonder was taking form. Notre Dame was no longer a dream. It was rock and glass, sweat and prayer. And just as its building reached to the sky, so too did the dreams of its makers. Because what they planned next would fight gravity and sense. Notre Dame was not like anything the city had ever seen, but it was also very bold. Vast walls grew, and the vaulted tops got bigger. A problem came up. The weight. The rock tops pushed out, not just down. The higher the vaults went, the more they tried to push the walls away. Old Romanesque churches fixed this with thick walls and small windows. But Notre Dame was built to breathe, to shine, to reach the skies in both spirit and space. That is when the Masons did something very new. They took a brave building idea, one hardly tried at the time, and went with it, the flying buttress. These were not just holders, they were outside arms of rock, arching from the upper walls down to solid posts standing away from the main building. Like bone wings, they held the cathedral from the outside, moving the outward push of the top into the ground, where it could do no harm. From the ground, they looked so very delicate, like lace made of limestone. But they were building smarts, and they let Notre Dame become what it was always meant to be, a building of air, light, and impossible height. The use of flying buttresses changed it all. With push off the inside walls, the builders could put in even more windows. The Great Rose windows, big wheels of stained glass showing saints, angels, and the end of the world, were no longer a dream. They became real. Color burst into the holy space, and God's stories now came not just from the stand, but from sunlight itself. Funnily, the first plans for Notre Dame did not have flying buttresses. Early Gothic builders had not yet seen their full power. But as the building grew, so did the strain. The masons changed, the fly, for real. They started adding these rock wings in the early 1200s, turning need into poetry. People at the time were split. Some thought the open holders were not pretty, breaking the clean shape of the building. But most stood in wonder. Notre Dame looked like it was being held up by rock angels in the middle of flight. The cathedral was no longer just a house of God. It was a living show of what belief and math could build together. A song carved in gravity fighting limestone, and its wings had only just started to open by the early 1200s. Notre Dame had already changed the Parisian skyline, but its Mostynone parts were still being made. As the eastern side got close to done, eyes moved westward. What grew there would become the face of the cathedral, the part most people will know first, the twin towers and the giant west facade. This front was not just a way in, it was a message, spiritual, building, and political. The church wanted you to feel tiny as you came to it, and it worked. The doors went up to impossible heights. Above them, lines of carved kings, prophets, saints, and devils watched every visitor. You were not just going into a building, you were walking into holy judgment. Buildings started on the west towers around. The 1220s, like everything else at Notre Dame, they took many years to finish. Each tower grew in parts, block by block, higher and higher, until they reached nearly 70 meters tall. And yet, they were never finished as first planned. No pointy tops, no needle ends, just big, flat-topped shapes, grand in their simple form. Between the towers sat the Gallery of Kings, 28 statues showing the rulers of Judah, wrongly thought during the French Revolution as French kings, and sadly beheaded by mad crowds. But during the 13th century, they sent a clear message: God's right, heaven's order, holy rule. The church and the crown walked side by side, and this waist-higher front step. Below them, the three big doorways served as holy storytelling in rock. The middle one, the portal of the Last Judgment, was carved with Christ, sitting in fame, with angels, devils, and reborn souls coming up from their graves. To the people who could not read, these scenes were not for looks, they were lessons. The word was clear: come in with respect. Forever starts here. Above the doors, a rose window grew into being nearly 10 meters across, framed by fancy tracery and with statues, oft Virgin Mary and Child. Light went through colored glass like a godly spot, light shining saints across the nave. By the mid-1200s, the towers were almost done. The front stood whole, quiet, the same, huge. It was a strong place of belief, a sign for God's power, and a warning to the sinner. And yet, the builders were not done. The heart of Notre Dame still needed to be finished. The transept, the roof, the spire that would one day touch the clouds. They had built its face. Now they would give it a crown, with the towers and west facade standing in proud fight of gravity. Notre Dame was becoming more than a shell. It needed a soul, and that soul lived inside in the big space of its nave, its transepts, and its holy choir. These were the rooms that would hold the voice of monks, the steps of kings, and the prayers of thousands. By the mid-1200s, work was on the transepts, the arms of the cross-shaped plan that gave Gothic cathedrals their known floor plan. Under builder Jean de Chelles, and later Pierre de Montreya, these wings were made bigger and decorated with new rose windows, even more fancy than Thossan, the western side. The north transept had a bright window that filled the space with cool blues and heavenly purples. The south warmer, fiery, and just as godly. These weren't just design picks. They were theology in color. The northern window showed the Old Testament, the southern the New. The two wings told the full story of salvation. One lit up in light, the other in fire. Inside the cathedral, poles grew like tree trunks in a forest of rock. vaulted tops stretched nearly 35 meters high, their ribbed arches meeting like hands in prayer. This was not building, it was dance, an upward move leading Thessaly up to heaven. And then there was the altar, the holy middle of the space. Here, the Mass was done. Here, relics were praised. And here, the top people of France came to bow. Kingly weddings, crowning masses, papal visits. Notre Dame became the spiritual stage for the country itself. But it was not just the top people who filled these walls. The people came too. Sellers, farmers, travelers. The cathedral became a public, safe place, echoing with lessons, songs, and the sometimes scolding from the stand. It was a placido see wonders or to ask for one. Every surface inside told a story. The carvings, the stained glass, even the floor tiles. Notre Dame did not just hold the godly, it performed it. By the 13th century, the inside was almost done. The heart of the cathedral beat loud. Butet still missed one thing, a crown to touch the heavens. And that is when they started building the spire. By the end of the 1200s, Notre Dame already seemed like a wonder. Its towers grew, its nave echoed with holy songs, and its rose windows filled the inside with godly light. But something still looked not done. The cathedral had a face, a heart and wings, but no crown. No upward line to lead the eye past the roofline and into the skies. That Iswan plans started for the spire. Unlike the twin towers, which were big and on the ground, the spire would be nice, an upward pointing needle growing from the crossing of the transeptrite at the middle of the church's cross-form plan. Made from oak and covered in lead, the first spire was both a technical test and a spiritual message. This was not just for looks. It was the exclamation mark of Notre Dame, its most seen prayer, its making needed master woodworkers and metalsmiths. Oak beams were lifted by human power, winches, pulleys, wood frames. The building had to be light, yet strong, to handle the winds, Thathet Paris, from the Seine. When done, the spire touched the sky like a sword held up in praise, and under it, even more fancy work was happening. Gargoyles, those strange, haunting things, came from the rock. They were not just ugly for fun. Many worked as waterspouts, moving rain away from the rock work. Others were signs, guards meant to scurry away bad things or tell sinners of what was waiting for them. The last part also had dozens of chimeras, statues of mixed beasts sitting high above Paris, their eyes forever looking at the horizon. They were nightmare and wonder, all in one part of the Gothic love for mystery and signs. Inside the chapels were finished choir seats, carvedon, relics, put in a holy place. Notre Dame was now fully working, both a holy machinion, a country stage. It had taken over 100 years of work, tens of thousands of workers, and the belief of a whole country. By 1345, nearly 200 years after the first rock was put down, the cathedral was seen as done. But done was never the right word. Notre Dame was never stuck in time. It would be fixed, remade, and brought back to life across hundreds of years. But by the 14th century, the building itself was finished. The Gothic age had built its great work. By the mid-14th century, Notre Dame de Paris was no longer just a cathedral. It was the cathedral, a tall sign of Catholic power, kingly rule, and country being. For the next 400 years, it stood not only as the heart of Paris, but as a stage on which Thegret shows of France would happen. It became the beating heart of state religion, having coronations, kingly weddings, and sad goodbyes. When kings wed, they did so under its vaulted tops. When wars were started, or winds celebrated, the bells of Notre Dame rang loud across the Seine. Rulers entered as kings of land, and left as chosen of God. Buted was not only kings who went through those big doors. Generals, bishops, and people from other lands came to bow or talk. And when bad things happened, no food, sicknesses, invasions, Parisians filled the nave with prayers and walks, desperate for godly help. The cathedral became a safe place of hope and fear, always looking, always waiting. Politically, Notre Dame became the spiritual hold of the French monarchy. Its middle spot, the Isle de la Cite, at the real and symbolic heart of Paris, made it the perfect setting for ritualized power. Priests, blessed flags before war. The crown was tied not just to kingly blood, but to godly order. If the king ruled France, then Notre Dame ruled Hissuel, and culturally it stayed a center of wonder. Travelers went miles just to see Italy relics, including the crown of thorns, thought to have been worn by Christ himself. Its great organ played loud during feast days. Its choirs echoed with polyphonic music that pushed old-time limits. Notre Dame was not still. It changed, taking in new art styles, music ways, and church forms. But by the 17th and 18th centuries, its Gothic looks started to be less liked. Baroque building was in style, and Notre Dame, dark, pointy, and old-time, was seen as not modern. Some fixing was even tried to make its look new, smoothing what had once been daring. Still, it stood, a cathedral between hundreds of years, praised yet more and more not seen. Its towers weathered storms and time. Its bells still tolled, but something was changing under its base. Notre Dame had been born from belief and crowned by kings. But soon it would face a force even rock could not stop: revolution. When the French Revolution started in 1789, Notre Dame de Paris found itself on the bad side of history. For hundreds of years, it had stood as a building to monarchy and religion, of the very groups the revolution wanted to get rid of. All at once, the cathedral thought had once crowned kings became a sign of being pushed down, and signs during revolutions not often live untouched. The attack was idea-based and physical. Revolutionaries run into the cathedral. Statues of the biblical kings that decorated the front were a mysticon for French rulers. All 28 were beheaded. Carvings were broken. Altars ruined. The great bells that had once tolled for kingly births and papal visits were pulled down and melted for cannon metal. Precious relics like the crown of thorns were taken and hidden. Many were gone. What was left was an empty shell. Notre Dame was officially 1793. It was no longer a church. Instead, it became the so-called Temple of Reason, reused for revolutionary parties celebrating non-religious enlightenment. At one time, it was even used as a big room for keeping wine. The high nave, once echoing with songs, now smelled of spilled barrels and wet rock. The spire, hurt and rotting, was in the end taken down for safety. Gargoyles fell from their spots. The roof had holes. Rats ran through the crypt. It seemed as though Paris no longer had a heart, just a forgotten ruin in its middle. And yet it lived. When Napoleon came to power, he saw the symbolic of Notre Dame. In 1804, he picked it as the place of his self-crowning as emperor. The cathedral was rechurched and cleaned up just enough to have the fancy event. This was not a religious act. It was a show. Napoleon crowned himself, famously taking the crown from the Pope's hands. Notre Dame once again helped the powerful, but without holiness it had once had. Still, many years of not caring left their marks. By the 1830s, Notre Dame was falling apart, physically and spiritually. It was set for being torn down more than once. Some Parisians thought it would be better to change it with something modern, something less old-time, less haunting. And then a writer came in. A writer wowed, see past the broken rocks and smashed statues to something endless, something worth saving. Because just when the world was ready to forget Notre Dame, Victor Hugo told them, in 1831, a book came out that would save a cathedral. Victor Hugo's Notre Dame de Paris, later known in English as The Hunchback of Notre Dame, was not just a Gothic story. It was a strong ask for keeping it safe. Through the eyes of Quasimodo, the not well-formed bell ringer, Hugo made Notre Dame into more than just a setting. It was a living person, hurt, not understood, lovely in its decay, and the people heard. The story moved Heart-Sacris, France. All at once, Parisians knew what they were about to lose. Notre Dame was not just old. It was a great work, a building to hundreds of years of praise and skill. The loud cry worked. By 1844, King Louis-Philippe okayed a full-scale fixing of the cathedral. Leading the work were two architects, Eugene Viollet-le-Duc and Jean-Baptiste Lassus. Their aim was not just to fix the harm, but to fix the soul of the cathedral. They changed worn-out statues, rebuilt the Gallery of Kings, and rethought the spire that had been taken down during the Revolution. This new spire, designed by Viollet-le-Duc, would rise 96 meters above the ground, taller and more fancy than the first one. It would become one of the most known shapes in Europe. Through the 19th and 20th centuries, Notre Dame went back to its right place at the spiritual and cultural middle of Paris. It had masses, saw freedom events, and welcomed millions of visitors. It lived through 2 world wars. During the Nazi takeover, its bells stayed quiet. When Paris was finally freed in 1944, they rang out in a wind. But sad things would happen again. On April 15, 2019, a fire started under the roof. In minutes, flames took over the wood frame known as the forest. Some beams from the 13th century. The fire burned for hours. The roof fell. The 19th century spire fell in a cloud of smoke. The world looked in fear as one of humanity's great buildings seemed to go away in real time. And yet, once again, it lived. Theric Towers stood strong. The rose windows lasted. The relics were saved. And the people of France, with the world, promised to rebuild. Notre Dame has always been more than building. It is memory, being, strength, a church, a sign, a survivor. And in every rock that grows from its ashes, it reminds us belief and beauty can be born again. She was born in 1775 in the Guangdong province of China. Her birth name was not written down. History would get to know her just as Qing Shi, wife of Cheng Ai, but what she did with that name would move empires. In her young years, she was a prostitute on a Canton floating brothel, a normal life for poor girls in 18th century coastal China. These so-called flower boats served sailors, navy men, and pirates. But she was not like the others. She recalled names. She made powerful clients speak. Over time, she became more than fun. She became an information seller. And then came Cheng Ai, a strong prophet lord who led the Red Flag Fleet, one of the most feared pirate groups in the South China Sea. He was not the first pirate she helped, but he would be the last. Moved by her smarts and cleverness, Cheng Ai asked for marriage. She said yes, but not with Narelles. In a move almost not heard of in her time, she talked for her spot. She wanted assured rule of the fleet, not just as a wife, but as a partner. She would handle political friendships, manage stolen goods, and have a say in every smart move. Cheng Ai agreed, whether from love or smarts. He knew she was a good thing. Their wedding in 1801 was the start of one of the most winning pirate families in history. Ching Shi quickly put Herschel Finto the world of pirate ruling. She learned the ranks, the fights, and the codes of Thepere world. While Cheng Ai sailed and won, she quietly made networks, got friends, and learned to rule from the dark. But she did not stay in the dark for long. When Cheng Ifas died in 1807, maybe in a big storm, many thought his empire would break. Dozens of leaders waited to jump, hoping for a power hole. What they got instead was a Coptic. Ching Shi stepped into leadership, not with hard force, but with smarts. She took over the Red Flag Fleet. She made friendships strong, and she wed Cheng Ai's adopted buoyant helper, Chung Po Sai, making sure of both personal loyalty and military power, from prostitute to pirate queen in less than 10 years. And she was just starting. When Ching Shi took charge in 1807, she did not just get a pirate fleet, she got a floating kingdom. But instead of it breaking in mess after her husband's death, she made her hold tighter and made it even more strong. Under her rule, the Red Flag Fleet did not just live, it grew. The South China Sea had long been bothered by pirates, but what Ching Shiled was not seen before. She was over an armada of over 300 ships, and in a year, that count grew to more than 600. Some counts say she, in the end, led over 1,800 boats with up to 70,000 men under her leadership, more than the navies of a few European powers at the time. She did this with mean smarts and a good knowing of pirate minds. She held power not just by force, but by making a system that tied her leaders to her. She made a hard code of laws that ruled every part of pirate life: goods, loyalty, order, and punishment. Not listening was met with quick meanness. Anyone seen stealing from shared money lost their head. If a pirate hurt a female prisoner without asking, he was. If a pirate ran away, his ears were cut off, and he was shown before the fleeters, a warning. But it was not just fear. Ching Shi gave safety, structure, and money. Her code let pirates keep a good part of goods, 20%, while the rest went to a shared fund run by her. This gave everyone a part in the system and built loyalty through being steady. Even beaten foes and coastal town people often chose to join her rather than fight. She split the huge fleet into 6 groups, each with its own color: red, black, white, blue, yellow, and green. But all in the end told her. Her closest friend and second in charge, Chung Po Sai, led the Red Squadron, her top force. Under Ching, she piracy bent, a government of its own, with money, taking, defense, and ranks. She ruled sea paths from Vietnam to Hong Kong, ruling trade, hitting imperial spots, and even taking money from coastal towns. The Qing dynasty had a navy. Qing Shi had an empire, and it was only getting bigger. Qing Shi did not just rule with charm. She ruled with rules, hard ones. While the picture of pirates often brings up mess and drunk fun, her fleet worked more like a disciplined compy than a group of bad guys. And at the middle of this structure was her pyrotect, a detailed system of laws that made mayhem into method. This code was not some love letter passed around by candlelight. It was mean, tying, and used without waiting. Every leader and crew member knew the risks. Breaking it meant shame at best, killing at worst. One of the most known rules ruled the splitting of goods. After a hit, all goods had to be shown to the fleet's central storehouse. The pirate who did it got a 20% cut, while the rest went into the group pool. That pool, ruled by Qing Shi and her men, was used for fleet fixing, widow payments, bribes, and emergency money. Stealing from the group was not just disliked, it was punished by death. Then came order. Not listening, battle was a big problem. Cowards who left their group or did not listen to order schooled be whipped, killed, or put into the sea. Running away, immediate head cutting. Thocode even handled loves. If a pirate took a woman, he was asked to treat her with respect. Sexual hurting was a reason for killing by head cutting. She was not into mess. She was Shinto control, and the code gave her that. It made a sure system where pirates knew thoroughs, the outcomes, and their part. It tied loyalty not just to Qing Shi as a leader, but to the system she was. Amazingly, she let prisoners and coastal people join her forces. In return, they had to promise loyalty to her code. Many did. Some joined from fear, others from liking. Some just knew that under Qing Shi, piracy was safer, more paid, and strangely, more fair than life under the bad Qing rulers. Her laws went past the decks off ships. Coastal towns, under her safety, paid money in return for safety and freedom. Those who fought were burned to the ground. Those who agreed became part of her growing empire. She was not just a pirate, she was a ruler, and her code was law. By 1808, Qing Shi's pirate empire was no longer just a sea problem, it was a treat. Her fleet ruled the South China Sea, broke trade paths, and hit coastal towns with no fear. The Qing dynasty, shamed and beaten, was made to act. But they were no ready for what they were facing. The Imperial Navy started a plan to crush the pirates, sending many warships to find Qing Shi's fleet. What came was not a series of fast wins, but a shaming show of imperial lack of skill. Time and again, the Navy was outmoved, outgunned, and outdone by Qing Shi's forces. She knew the waters better than anyone. She used weatherways, island cover, and shallow waters to trap bigger Qing ships. Hair sailors could fight in together units, change boats mid-battle, and pull enemies in with scary sureness. On more than one time, whole Qing groups were taken, their ships put into the Red Flag Fleet and Spirit. The difference was huge. While imperial men were often bad, underpaid, or scared, Qing Shi's men were well put together and very loyal, tied by her code and paid for winning. As the battles went on, the Qing dynasty's desperation was clear. They asked European powers, mainly the Portuguese and the British, to help in navy fights. These foreign navies had better ships and firepower, but they did not have the local knowing and togetherness of purpose that Qing Shi's armada had. Still, the push grew. By 1809, a group of Qing, Portuguese, and Cantonese forces trapped parts of her fleet. Yet even then, she fought them off, going back smartly and starting counter-hits that shocked her enemies. She was not just living, she was shaming the empire. But the war was costly. Long fighting used up goods and tired men. Even pirate empires can't handle war forever. And while she was not beaten at sea, Qing Shi knew something key. Sometimes power is not about winning every fight. Cement is about knowing when to leave with everything still there. She had no plan of dying Gotzi or being pulled in chains to a Qing court. She had a different plan, one that would leave even her enemies shocked. By 1810, Qing Shi had done the impossible. She had stopped the power of the Qing dynasty, shamed foreign navies, and ruled the waves with unmatched power. But she was also a realist. She knew that wars, especially ones with endless fronts and growing enemies, could not be fought for all time. Goods were getting low, friendships strained, and her fleet, though still huge, was starting to feel the weight of loss. So, she changed plans. Qing Shi went to the Qing government, not with giving up, but with rules, bold ones. She knew she had the upper hand. The Qing had failed to beat her in fighting. Their own people feared her more than they respected the empire. She could bargain not as a bad person asking forgiveness, but as a leader of a state. She went to Guangzhou, herself on her own ship with armed guards, flying the red flag fleet colors proudly. It was not a plea, it was a power show. She asked for safety, not just for her, but for her whole fleet, thousands of pirates. She asked for the right to keep her riches. She even said her second in charge and husband, Chang Po Sai, be given a military rank in the Qing Navy. The government was shocked, but the truth was they were tired, too. The empire could not pay for another costly long campaign. So, in a moment of rare smarts, they said yes. Qing Shi gave up with style. On April 18, 1810, she led over 17,000 pirates, men, women, and children, into the city, not in chains, but in a line. Over 200 ships were given over, weapons put down ceremonially, and the whole pirate group broken up without a drop of blood spilled. No trials, no killings, no losing of riches. Chang Po Sai was given a captain job in the Qing Navy. Qing Shi, as a free woman, not touched, not beaten, and still very rich. In a world where most pirate stories finish in lies or death, Qing Shi's finished with talking and leaving. She had played the game perfectly, first with cannons, then with words. And as her red flags came down, her legend was only starting to rise. Most pirate stories finish in blood, gallows, or being forgotten. But Qing Shi did not just get away from that fate. She made a second life from it. After talking for the great Esperit, give up in history, she went away not as a runner, but as a respected, rich woman with her story safe. In 1810, after the give-up of her fleet, she stayed in Canton, Guangzhou, with her husband, Chang Po Sai, who now worked as a captain in the Qing Navy. The change from pirate queen to respected person might seem silly, but for Qing Shi, it was just another act of planned living. She lived openly, even well, and the Qing rulers mostly left her alone. Rather than going into being forgotten, she quietly became a businesswoman. She started a gambling house and an opium smuggling business, by law legal, but mostly not seen due to her power. She was not out to build another empire, but she had no plan of being forgotten either. She kept her friends, protected her riches, and lived on her rules. Her wedding to Chung Po Sai lasted, and together they had a family. While he kept working for the Qing Navy, finding pirates, ironically, like their past selves, Qing Shi worked on their business things. She moved in top groups, wassisked on sea things, and stayed a known figure among sailors and traders all over the South China coast. What is amazing is not just that she lived, it is how she lived. She broke every shape her world had for women. Born poor, sold into prostitution, she fought her way to the top of a man-ruled criminal world. Then, instead of dying in battle or on scaffold, she left peacefully and passed away of old age in 1844 at the age of 69. She did not look for forgiveness. She did not need it. Her life was the biggest act of fighting back, a living no to every law, custom, and hope set for her. In a time when women were hardly let to speak in public, Qing Shi led fleets, decided on treaties, and talked with emperors. And then she went away richer and freer than any pirate in history. Her sails down, her cannons quiet, yet her legend still echoed across the sea. History remembers pirates like Blackbeard, Bartholomew Roberts, and Henry Morgan. Men who went around the Caribbean, made chaos, and had mean ends. But in the shadow of their bad name stands Qing Shi, not only as their equal, but as someone who was better than them by almost every way. She did not lead a few ships. She led whole fleets. She did not take from a few coastal towns. She ruled whole parts of the sea. And she did not die on the gallows or in a gunfight. She talked her way out of piracy and into peace. Among the group of pirate legends, she stays the most winning and least understood. But make no mistake, her win was not just luck or meanness. It was smarts, brains, and a deep knowing of power. She was a planner, a ruler, and a mind reader. She knew how to keep loyalty through fear, yes, but also through order, prize, and a well-made system. And what made her truly special was the fact that she did all of this as a woman in Qingara China, a world full of Confucian thoughts that kept women too quiet and serving. Women were not meant to lead in the market, much less on the high seas. Qing Shi did not just fight that norm, she broke it. She got the respect of hard pirate leaders, foresaid the Qing dynasty to the talking table, and finished her life as a business owner and family head. She was not relying on a man's story. She took it, grew it, and made it her own. In popular memory, she stays something of a ghost, less known than her male equals, less loved in Western books, and often left out of main history. But in sea circles and Chinese coastal stories, she is talked about with wonder. The Red Flag Fleet may have gone away. It sails down for good. But the memory of Qing Shi stays like a ghost ship, quiet, untouchable, and bigger than life. Not just a pirate, not just a woman, but a legend that made empires bow. And in a world ruled by men, she did not ask for a spot at the table. She took the whole ocean, despite leading the largest pirate fleet the world has ever seen. Qing Shi stays, strangely not, in most main history books. Her story, though huge, has been hidden, put in the shadow Western pirate myths. and buried under layers of colonial bias, gender prejudice, and political unease. Why? Because her story does not fit the normal shape. She was Nota, sad anti-hero. Like Blackbeard, she did not die in battle. She was not European, and most scary of all, she was a woman who beat an empire. That kind of power breaks the Neatman-ruled story historians have long liked. In Chinese official books, she is seen more like a problem fixed than a figure worth learning. The Qing dynasty did not want to praise her, they wanted to forget her. After all, she showed their navy weakness, fought Imperial Yule, and went away without punishment. Even in winning, she was a shame to the throne. Western historians did no better. For hundreds of years, piracy has been loved through a European view. Peg legs, rum, parrots, and goods. Qing Shi did not fit that picture. She was not swashbuckling. She was smart. She did not fight for fame. She talked for power. She was not killed by the state. She talked with it and won. And for many writers, that was not exciting. It was not easy. But in recent years, her legend has come back. Scholars, feminist historians, and pirate lovers have started to bring back her memory, taking back her place in the world story of sea power, documentaries, history stories, and even video games have started to see the pirate queen of the South China Sea, and still so much of her life stays covered in mystery. Her real name is gone. Much of her voice lives on only through the view of her enemies, Qing men, foreign sailors, and later European lookers. But what little we know is enough to build the shape of a giant. She was not just a woman who broke the shape. She was a woman who never cared it was there. Qing. She did not need the world's okay to become powerful. She took power, used it with, and went away into history with more riches, rule, and grace than any pirate, male or female, before or after. She did not fade, she was erased, but legends, as always, find their way back. Qing. She did not wear a crown. She did not need to. Her power did not come from a thronier, kingly blood. It came from leadership, from respect, from fear, from thousands of voices yelling her orders across the waves. In every real sense of the word, she was a queen, a ruler, of a kingdom without lines, flags, or fixed land. Her area was the South China Sea, and her reach went from the Gulf of Tonkin to the shores of Guangdong. She built something no one had before or since. Her pirate group was not just criminal, it was political, organized, working. She ruled trade paths, made codes of law, talked treaties, and kept order across an area that even the Qing Empire had trouble to rule. Her ships were not spread out hitters, they were fleets. Her leaders were not freelancers, they were officers. Her people were not bad guys, they were citizens of a floating nation. And yet, what makes her story truly unmatched is not just her rise, but her leaving. Most pirate stories finish in fire and rope. Qing Shi's finished in talking, leaving, and riches. She did not go down with her ship. She stepped off it, not hurt, not bowed, and still holding the money bag. By the time she passed away in 1844, she had done what no pirate, no emperor, no general had done before. She went away from total power by choice and kept her legend safe. Today, few buildings have her name, no palace, no statuing the square, but her being haunts the South China Sea like a storm cloud that never went away. In the talks of sailors, in the ink of rebel women, In the hearts of Thossahu, know that leadership is not about birthright, but about will. Qing Shi was proof that greatness does not ask for permission. That even in a world built to silence, women, one voice, sharp, smart, and not bending, can lead an empire. She ruled without saying Zori. She fought without waiting, and she left without defeat. Not a myth, not a legend, but a woman who won the sea and went away before it could take her. Her sails are gone, but her shadow still stretches across the waves.